Hi guys, it's Mark Zickery, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zickery of Space Command. And I'm here to talk about something just dear to my heart, which is why I love used books. And you know from all these Mr. Sci-Fi commentaries that I'm doing that I'm quite an aficionado of science fiction from past decades, particularly the 50s and into the 60s. And I recently got some really cool used paperbacks. I just wanted to go over some of them and share them with you and let you know why I think they're cool. First of all, there was, during the 50s, there were a handful of science fiction paperback publishers. And so there was Ballantine, there was Signet, there was Ace, etc. And there were basically two cover artists, who were the major cover artists for these science fiction books, and they had very different styles. One was much more abstract, the other was a little more representational, but they were both very striking. And so this is, for instance, is a good example of one of these artists. His name was Richard Powers, and that's Dark Dominion, which is by David Duncan, and it's about a space station being built. And David Duncan is not well known now, but he wrote a number of science fiction books in this period, and I believe he also did the script for George Pal's Time Machine. So he might be someone for you guys to seek out and check out. And this, of course, I don't know if this is an Ed Emshwiller cover. I can't quite make out the signature. It may or may not be, but Ed Emshwiller was the other one, and we're going to show you some samples of his work. But this is Daybreak 2250 AD by Andre Norton, who was actually a female science fiction writer. Andre Norton was her pen name, and often they would retitle books from the hardcover release to the softcover to give them a little more punchy title. So this was called Daybreak 2250 AD, and the original title on hardcover was Starman's Son. Neither particularly great title, but you know, but it's a very nice cover illustration. Sort of a after the apocalypse kind of book. This is The Immortals, which is a book by James Gunn made up of several interlinked novellas. And the interesting thing about this is about a race of humans who have a mutation that makes them essentially immortal, and people are pursuing them to get their blood. And this was made into a TV show called The Immortal. And back when The Fugitive was successful, there were many, many other shows that were created that tried to capture that same formula, which is basically there's a guy being chased for some reason by those in authority or evil people or whatever. It's just basically a guy on the run and the adventures he has. I think this only lasted a year. The Immortal, I think it was on ABC, but that was also when Harlan Ellison came up with the Star Lost. That was also sort of another fugitive structure of people on the run. So there you go. And then let's see what else we have here. Lots of cool stuff. This now in the 60s, late 50s into the 60s, you get another great cover artist, which is a very unusual thing. It's two people working together, Leo and Diane Dillon. They were a married couple. They were interracial. He was black, she was white. They came to prominence with the covers of Harlan Ellison, and then Harlan, when he was editing paperbacks, had them do a lot of paperbacks by other writers. For instance, Mother Night, the first paperback edition, I think it's the first edition of Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut, has a great cover that they did. This is Wizard of Earthsea, which is a classic fantasy by Ursula K. Le Guin with a great with a great cover by them, Leo and Diane Dillon, and there was a whole group of books done by Ace at this time that had covers by them. I love Left Hand of Darkness, which is another great novel by Ursula K. Le Guin. A lot of people love this book. It's a sweeping fantasy. It's never quite caught my fancy. I'm not as big a fantasy guy as a science fiction guy, but there it is. This is interesting. This is an early edition of the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick. Now, Philip K. Dick was churning out books at a furious pace. This is one of his best. And it's a cover. It's the fun part about seeking out used books is you'll often find editions that you've never seen before. And although I've read editions of this book, I have editions of this book, I've never seen this cover. So it's really fun to come across this, and really, really neat. And Philip K. Dick, there's one year where he wrote 12 novels, and as well as novellas and short stories, just an incredibly prolific writer. This is one of his later books from the 70s. This is Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, which is, this is the original, this is the first edition paperback. There was a hardcover. Here's another very cool cover. I believe this is Richard Powers, or it's definitely in his style. This is Soldier Ask Not by Gordon Dixon, very popular writer. The novella this is based on won the Hugo. Then there's an author, Murray Leinster. And the interesting thing about Murray Leinster, beyond the fact that I named a character after him that I then had to rename when I cast Victor Manso in Space Command, Murray Leinster's real name was Will Jenkins, and he decided that his pseudonym would be Murray Leinster. There's a story there, I'm sure. But again, this is another paperback from the 50s that I never saw before. It's a really cool cover. It's about 4 telepathic children from outer space who arrive on Earth and basically cause a lot of trouble. So then, let's see what else we have. I just bought a bunch of these, because it was my birthday, etc. Now we get to Ed Emshwiller, who many of you know is one of my favorites. He did the great Heinlein juvenile cover there of Have Spacesuit Will Travel. And this is an ace double, and I think for a time he was doing all the ace science fiction covers. So this is Voodoo Planet, and on the other side is Plague Ship. Now, the author is listed as Andrew North, but that's actually Andre Norton. So this is an earlier, a different permutation of that name. But the thing I love about Ed Emshwiller is just the futuristic quality, his design sense, his compositional sense. He must have been churning out these things like one a day or, a few days, but amazing speed. And I just love his work. This is interesting. Life Force, this is a later edition from the 80s. This is by Colin Wilson. It's originally a book called The Space Vampires. And it was inspired by a short story by A.E. Van Vogt. And then it was made into this really weird science fiction movie directed by Tobe Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it's such a weird movie. I thought, I'm going to read the book and see if the book is as loopy as the movie is. But when the movie came out, they retitled the book to match the movie, and this is that edition, movie tie-in edition. Now, my friend William F. Nolan recently passed away, and he co-wrote Logan's Run with George Clayton Johnson, another dear friend. And so I came across this copy of the 3rd Logan book that Bill Nolan wrote, and I didn't have a copy of this, and it's in really good condition, and so I bought it. Here's another, and then some of these covers you would have this is a Richard Powers cover. Again, he gets more and more abstract as time goes on. This is Paul Anderson, several novellas by Paul Anderson, Guardians of Time. And here's some more Ed Emshwiller work. This is Men on the Moon, really a cool cover. Often he would put something in foreground and something in far background. So you can see, for instance, with Voodoo Planet, he's doing the exact same gag as he is here on Men on the Moon. This was a collection of stories about landings on the moon edited by the great Donald A. Wollheim, who later started DAW Books, D-A-W, which was his initials. And then on the other side, Murray Leinster shows up again with City on the Moon, and this is another Ed Emshwiller cover. So pretty cool. And then finally, last but not least, every now and then you see a book that has such a lurid, cool cover that you get it. It was a little more expensive, but I've seen this at book shows and I wanted it. And this is from 1945, a paperback edition of the Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. And that is just such a, it's just, see, the thing about paperbacks is they were designed to catch your eye from like a distance. If they do that, and that's why it's large type, big, colorful illustrations. This was meant, so if you're in a drugstore or basically a drugstore or a bookstore or wherever, this catches your eye and you buy it. Because they used to have them on these spindle racks like comic books, and that would be meant to catch your eye. So definitely did the trick for me. So I love used books. I love used bookstores because they speak of an era of great hope, of great exuberance, of artists just just pounding it out. But quality emerged from that. This was not. The people who wrote science fiction back then, the ones certainly who made names for themselves, really loved it. Really loved what they were doing, and the artists did too. You can tell. And these are phenomenal people, and I'm so glad I get exposed to these. And they were so prolific that I'll come across, to this day, books from the 50s, science fiction books that I have never seen. And that's always such a wonderful surprise and such a good time had by all, particularly by me. And I love used bookstores. There's one up in Morro Bay that we just were visiting, and I complimented them because, see, the great thing about used bookstores is you find things that you never saw before, or that you didn't know you would want, or you didn't know they existed. It's not like the internet. The internet, you kind of have to be going where things either guide you via the algorithms or things that you already know you want. there isn't that same quality, that wonderful quality of discovery. It's different, and so I just hope every last used bookstore that's existing now stays in existence. They're a dying breed, sadly, but I could spend a lot of time in used bookstores, and I certainly have. And you never know. And sometimes I go to other areas of the bookstore, and I find things that are just fascinating. Books on philosophy or sports or whatever, and I'll just sit there and thumb through that book. Sometimes I'll buy those books, and I'll find myself taken to some place I have never been. So that's about it for now. So lots more to come, guys. Lots more adventures to talk about. And thanks for everything. And we'll talk soon. Bye.